The following is the conversation between me and Dr. Lollie Mancey. Dr. Lollie is a program director at UCD, University College of Dublin, and an educational provocateur, anthropologist, AI ethicist, and we delve into a interesting subject into this talk where we use AI and start to explore about workforce and how we came about to use AI to improve equality in work, and of course talk about ethics and many other things. This is Ways of Working podcast, and if you like it, please subscribe, leave a like, and share this with your friends. Thank you. And
You're welcome.
it's been great to talk to you because I just talked to Angus. I don't know if you know him. He's a PhD at Trinity College, and he does philosophy, and but actually he's been posting a lot about ethical AI, which has been
Great.
great. So I feel like it's kind of like straight out someone who is very specialist on this. I can talk to you. That's you're more to the entrepreneurial side of AI. I can tell.
Yeah, absolutely,
Oh, that's
absolutely. But
great. Yeah.
you'd be remiss to be in technology and not be an AI ethicist these days.
Yeah, I think you have to touch this topic somehow, right?
Yeah,
If you want to
yeah,
work with and you want to touch on these grounds, even though because that is new laws coming over, so that's pretty
yeah.
much challenging for everyone, I believe.
Listen, the enactment of the EU AI Act will be the interesting part.
Yeah, it would be.
It's. I foresee it being a little bit like GDPR, like kind of it'll be like, what do I do? I know I have to
Yeah,
do something, but what do I do? And then how does that get rolled out from, okay, tech companies all have people, but like what
mm,
about the SMEs?
exactly.
What about the individual entrepreneurs? It's
Yeah,
more of a
I'm
challenge.
more I'm more worried about open sources. I haven't seen new drafts yet, but the first draft I
Yeah.
saw it, I was very concerned. But let's see.
Yeah,
Let's see what's gonna happen,
there's
right?
well, I think it's amazing that we're doing this
Yeah,
because we're the first, right? So that's important. Like, kind of, I'm very concerned about the lack of a global overview, but
yeah,
also we can come on to that. But the other part that's really interesting is how how do we enact with this legislation as human beings?
yeah.
We're not machines ourselves. So there's a fair bit in it, also like yourself, that I'm kind of there's a few things that could be up for interpretation.
It's true. It is. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you need to like to understand a little bit better because it's a
Yes.
new field. It's a new way to explore things. It's a new technology. So it's a new. It's kind of like, how can I say? It's when there is nothing and then there was factories. It's like
Yeah.
how you dwelled into that. That's I believe that it is right now.
Yeah, yeah, I
Nice.
completely agree.
Yeah, thank you. I use this link here because I can take your signal and I can put here to record.
Sure.
So that's why I send this link. Looks dodgy,
Yes,
but
perfect.
it's just what it is. And
That's
yeah,
perfect.
we can. Well, I don't want to take much of a time, but I have a few questions. And but then
Sure.
I'd like first to start. So you talk a little bit about yourself and what you do and what do you specialize in, and then you
Yeah.
can go from that.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm
Yeah.
Lollie, also known as Dr. Lollie Mancey, and if you're really getting me on a bad day, Dr. Lorraine Mancey.
Okay.
But that's nobody says that. Everyone calls me Lollie, which is my nickname since childhood.
Good.
I'm currently in the UCD Innovation Academy. Been here 6 years, but I'm that unusual breed of anthropologist in innovation.
Oh,
So I come from a social justice, anthropology, human-centered background,
okay.
which actually now makes a lot of sense, but in the early days probably didn't as much. And I did my PhD on organizational learning, which really could, I mean, in those days, the words organizational learning and knowledge management were fairly interchangeable. That's when we were looking at, how people hoard knowledge, share knowledge, what that looks like, what that feels like. And that was a blip ago in history. And it feels like a million years ago now, because actually most of the learning from my PhD work, which was in my field of study was in Irish Aid, looking
All
at sort
right.
of the government response and how they share information. And what was interesting about that was most of that research is applicable to every organization, including academia, which is siloed culture, innovation change, complicated
Yeah.
leadership, top down, bottom up, side in, all of that. So really nothing has changed.
Okay.
Even though the landscape has changed
Mm-hmm.
dramatically, it's still humans that seem to struggle
Mm,
with systems that we've created for
I see.
ourselves. Yeah.
And the challenge is still on the relationship that we have.
The challenges in the relationship, but also I think probably in our definition of work,
Okay.
so
Mm,
what the world of work to some extent is broken in my
mm,
mind. And I'm using the metric of the fact that we've never been more burnt out, never been more tired, never been more pulled and pushed, from pillar to post, as it were.
mm-hmm.
The COVID I can call the incidents more than an incident, but the COVID years gave us an insight into making a huge change, the kind of changes we'd been talking about, but no one wanted to implement,
Mm,
working from home, a blended approach, quality over quantity for some, not all, for majority still
mm-hmm.
not. But this idea of sort of set hours and clocking in and clocking out, now that world has changed to a more blended approach. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
some companies still want people in, but majority of people being able to have a little bit more flexibility, that working very well for some, less well for others.
It's true.
So I'll give you an example. Seeing as we're talking about women in tech today, the blended working system was really good for family life, and
Mm,
continues to be so. So
see.
you're no longer having to commute, sit on the M50, et cetera, and all of the the stresses with that. And the majority of people, if their parents both are working, so as a consequence, when there's a return to the office, for ease of pick up children and everything else, because our school system is still the archaic
Mm-hmm.
Catholic school system where you finish
Mm-hmm.
halfway through the day, and the women are in those early days were at home, right? So they
Yeah.
could come. Now they're at work, so they're either working half a day or they're using their flexibility of working in the office or working from home, pick up the children, come back. Now they're at home with the children.
Mm-hmm.
So we're unfairly discriminated against in that way by it, but also it works better for the family potentially. Now, the other,
Sure.
you may be able to save on childcare. The other thing that's difficult about that is with the return to the office, men now have more visibility, women less. I think we'll
Mm,
probably start to see more women passed over for promotion and things like that because of that.
mm.
So it's very complicated. Everything we do has all of these causes and these effects to it,
Yeah.
and they're very often unintended.
Yeah.
But then we have to deal with them culturally
Yeah.
and
That
socially.
begs my first question then. Like, say about like being at home, it challenged the way that it could be visible for your higher ups, like your manager and anybody else.
Right.
So how do you feel like a person that working from home, even more like women that have this relationship with kids? We have a lot of single women as well, single mothers, sorry, as
Sure.
well, and they have this challenge where they work from home because they enable their family life, and at the same
Yeah.
time can be productive as someone that is on the office. But then we have this problem that a person in the office is more likely to be more visible because they're there.
Right.
So what
Right.
do you think a woman can do, to increase that visibility? Because I believe, because for me, the
I think
perspective,
that's the wrong question.
the wrong question. Okay. Sorry. Yeah,
I
because
don't
for
think women
me,
need to increase their visibility. I
yeah.
think the
Okay.
system needs to change to
All right.
accommodate the school system for a
Okay.
starter.
Okay.
I mean, let's take the school gates, right?
Yeah.
So now you're getting me fired up. So
Good.
the school
Good.
gates are a good one. Who is at the school gates at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? 95% women,
All right.
unfortunately, but they're both working. So that's a
Okay.
discussion that they're going to have to make if they're in. I'm assuming, for a moment, this is a heterosexual situation,
Mm.
and the woman is there and the man is at
Mhm.
work.
Mhm.
So why? Firstly, how did that come about? Why isn't the school system a different system to enable both parents to work?
I see.
Firstly, that's
Just
the first thing.
just to just
I mean,
to
it's
just to ask another thing. So the school gates, only the mothers can pick up the kids, or the fathers can
no, anybody. But if you
All
go
right.
to any school, do the research. Go to any school.
And the
It's
majority is
predominantly
women that
female.
go there. Okay. Okay.
But they're also, they're also, highly skilled people. So like
Right.
kind of, and most often they may be at
Mhm.
a similar level. So
Mhm.
it's just this sort of assumption about what is called the second shift, and actually women are now doing the second and the third shift. There's some fantastic research that shows
Mm.
you that, well, fantastically, because it's illuminating, not fantastic in terms of what it is,
Yeah.
that actually the more money you earn, you don't take on less domestic work. So this
Mm.
idea of, of sort of equality, I think, is still an aspiration for many. But
Hmm.
I think we need a complete reconfiguration of not only how we operate in the world of work, but in terms of what we're doing and why.
Mm.
And so I'm a bit of a revolutionary in that sense. You know,
Hmm.
I think we get moments in time where we can change the system. This is one of them. And this is one of them because of AI.
Mm.
So we don't yet have it, but it's coming where we can redefine work. So instead of having school in certain years up to sort of 21, something like that in college, and then our time of work and then our retirement,
Hmm.
I think that's a broken system. I
Mm.
think the way it should be is you're in education at different times in your life. You take
Okay.
gaps at different times in your life when you need it,
Hmm.
and you work longer. So it doesn't become work retirement and at 65 or 67 you finish. You
Mm.
know, they're very, very productive years, especially for entrepreneurs with a lifetime of skill set. So I think it's kind of almost like those three things need to be jiggled around in a completely different way. So you become a lifelong learner. And that's my wheelhouse in UCD, you know, people in their 40s and 50s who are pivoting. And then you also can take breaks when you need it, and they're equal. So we look at Northern Europe, you know, and the Scandinavian countries. The level of parental leave for both
Yeah.
is phenomenal,
Hmm.
you know. And in Ireland, it's still a very much a weighted game, and very difficult for people to manage. And so I just think we may have some opportunities now with AI taking out some of the heavy lifting of the administrative work.
Okay.
But there's another question. Are leaders and managers going to be okay with the fact that you're productive 4 hours a day, or they're going to still demand the 7 or 8? You know, it's,
Mm.
can you work a 4 day week?
Hmm.
It's been trialed, it's been successful, highly
Hmm.
more productive to be at home, more productive to have a 4 day week. But you can't have businesses that say, okay, you can work 4 days, but you're working 14 hours each day on those days. You know, so we've got to change the concept of work,
Yeah.
and ask ourselves, what are we doing here? It's, you know, it's literally a race to the bottom if we're all frazzled.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to foresee different relations for work because first I'm from tech, and for tech area, for me it's been amazing because we are so in high demand. Even after the layoffs, we are
Yeah,
so in high demand that actually all the flexibility of work is being implemented. So
right,
every time I receive like messages on LinkedIn, people say, "Oh, you can." There is this company here. It's hiring someone at senior level, 4 hours, 4 days per week, and whatever,
yeah,
and proposing like a large sum of money. That's been great for me, but at the same time, for me, it's difficult to
right,
see other areas. Like for example, how there's a how this relation of work and a different time and a constant education. We work for someone, for example, that works in a coffee shop, for example, that's actually usually is a person that is not a high skill person, so he didn't went to
right.
college or didn't study, but this person, for example, is in a deli on Centra, for example. So how this would work for these people who have a different relation of work,
Yeah,
yeah, in the
absolutely. I
front
have an
facing
answer.
work. All
So
right, Ed,
part of what
please.
I'm doing academically is also, you know, looking at sort of policy changes. So coming from an evolutionary perspective,
Hmm.
you know, we didn't evolve to be sedentary. That's the first thing. We evolved to move. We need to move. We know we have problems, you know, inherently in that, in the way that we're working, we're sitting down
Yeah.
and all the rest of it. But we also work to, we need to socialize and we need to be around other people.
Mhm.
So I think part of the sort of the frazzling of our system is that our system is weighted wrongly, or the wrong expectations on us. Here's where I see work going.
Okay.
And I think that this is going to be, I'm a tech optimist. So I think it's going to be, I mean, I teeter between
All right.
dystopian, utopian views, but of course, like everybody, but I
Please.
am an optimist. And I think that we will get to a system whereby our barista is going to be, is going to be automated, no question. Our driver
Mm.
and taxi automated, our cashiers automated systems. You know, that's
Mhm.
where we're going. And so, as a consequence, those questions may well be redundant even in a decade, where we'll need
Mm.
something like a universal basic income, and that we will be task based, not career based. So the
Okay.
task based jobs is the gig economy that's coming, a little bit
Mm.
like you say, but except they're going to say to you, not 4 days a week, they're going to say to you, here's the job, what's the price on the
I
job,
see.
and you do the job when you want. That's where we're going.
Mm.
So we need to and I have to develop programs and teaching facilities for jobs that don't yet exist in a world that can only be imagined somewhat. You know, so small task. But part of that is to have a look at the trends and the way that we're going. So we're going to automate a lot of the lower paid jobs. We're going to have societal issues for that, from that, no question. So, we're going to have, if we have a universal basic income of, say, I don't know, 350 or something like that, right off the top of my head, what are people going to actually do? Some people will be in the gig economy, absolutely. Other people, no. So are we going to have, a disparity there between those that are in that economy and those that aren't? And how do we upskill people to help everybody, stand a chance of that? It's not just we can't just train people in tech. We still need historians, sociologists, politicians, artists, linguists, and all of that to work with this, So it's going to be really, really interesting to see where it goes. But some of on the dystopian side, some of the negatives I can see is perhaps a rise in addiction, obesity, leisure time, and we need purpose. We evolved to have purpose. Funny enough, we're not driven by money. We think we might be, but we're not. The majority of us are driven by purpose and adding value. And so I would love to see on the utopian side a world where we are volunteering more, we are helping out those less fortunate than ourselves, that we give our time to pursuits of things that we know are acts of service. And actually, when they do these amazing things with sort of happiness indexes and research. Stanford University do a lot on happiness, and it's amazing. And what they look at is the thing that brings you the most happiness is service. So I wonder if we can't use the advent of AI now to take away the drudgery for the mundanity of what we're doing and enable us to be freed up to have that mentality to be able to lean in and to be of service, to do things. If we're not doing them for money, why are we doing them?
Yeah, I see.
Some really interesting things coming up, and I don't have the answers.
But I feel like for me, it's like while I'm more studying and more delve into AI, I feel like AI is not a silver bullet at all. And
Absolutely not.
And it's very.
We're talking about generative AI there.
Yeah, and generative AI for me actually is the worst part of AI. Like there's so many beautiful things that AI does, and generative for me is just a subset that actually now took this awareness like about what it is and how companies are using our data. That's the important question. And
yeah,
and I have my controversial opinions on this, but I leave this behind. I leave this aside. But then for me is like, of course, I believe like a lot of things can be automated. A lot of things that requires, I don't know, you to do a repeat job every day.
Yeah.
I believe these things should be kind of like automated to improve as well the way that we work. So for example, I once created a small system to actually could automate it the way that you pour beer, for example. It was just an automation like that is in Germany, for example, bars that you can go there, put a coin and then get a beer. You don't need the barman. But the way that it's designed and actually like, well, I like to go to the bar. I like to talk to the barman. So why we don't have an automated system that actually enable this person to be there? And as well, we have an automated system over there. So like that's the way I believe that we should design things. We should design things not to take over the whole job of that person, but rather bring that person with the best.
I can tell you who's going to step into those jobs, the Irish. So if you're hired to stand in a bar and talk, that's like the perfect dream.
Yeah, it's true. But it's true, yeah. And for me, that would overcome a lot of challenges. So, for example, in tech's a male dominant area, like there's a lot of men. There's like, I think like the last research I saw is 70% of Irish tech workforce is men.
Yes, and you're about right. Yeah.
And the other 30% is not even all women. It's like the other genders over there. So it's like
yeah, I mean, I've got a few stats. So
okay, cool. That's
currently 20, I'll be very specific, 26.7% of women are involved in technology, but only 25% are involved in tech leadership. Actually, those figures are massaged. So I'm working with a group called Tech Founder at the moment, and we're looking into this. It was recently raised in the Dial, which is really interesting because, those figures were taken on the idea of female founders, but actually it was on senior management teams. So it was CTOs, CFOs, and CEOs, for example. So the figures are a little bit swayed. So I would say, I don't want to put a figure on it, but it's way less than 25%, 14% in software, so here's the other thing. If you flip that on its head,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, if you look at the sort of the gender diversity, you know, the pay disparity is that 63% of women globally in
Okay.
tech will be getting lower salaries,
Mm.
and they earn on average 3% less, right? So 63% is a huge number that are on that lower echelon. And I think possibly some of the other issues there is the intensive amounts of emotional labor that can go on. And like I say, the
Mm.
second and third shift for women as
Mm-hmm.
well. They're very often sort of the caregivers and the managers of that. But also, you know, we can also see on the other side, the flip side, the advantages to having more women in your companies in terms of technology is that gender diversity makes your company, and in a more you know, equity and diversity, a leveler playing field can make your company up to 25% more profitable, higher levels of innovation for
Mm-hmm.
sure. The more mixed and diverse your teams, 100%. I do this in UCD, and we have teams all of the time coming in. I teach and design two courses. Graduate certificate in creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and then another one which is a digital transformation, technology, and resilience. And they're both Springboard funded, so the government fund people to come in. They're generally from their mid 30s up to their 60, 65 age range, and they're pivoting from one career or one idea into another, very
Mm-hmm.
often with a tech gap.
Nice.
So we're not training them to become technical experts, but we do need to know what's going on and how to ask the right questions. So it's about that,
Yeah.
but also it's the mindset of curiosity, you know,
Mm.
that's really important. Every time I have a very diverse team of what were veritable strangers that sit in a group together that never would have met under any other circumstances, we get the most incredible innovative responses from them,
Mm-hmm.
and they design full businesses, you know. And every time I go into a team where we go, oh, they go, oh, these are the innovators, this is the innovative sector of our organization, less so.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the key, and like, you know, the proof of the pudding is always the diversity
Mm.
gives you greater innovation and creativity. It's A plus B equals DEF, you know. It's like
Yeah.
you never know what you're going to get, and it depends on that dynamic because everyone's coming with a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course there's the biases in the algorithms, and you know, and who coded them and all of that. And the idea of succession, you know, we did quite well in this country in terms of getting, you know, more girls into STEM
Yeah.
subjects, but we need to champion women, you know, within the tech sector so we have succession, because otherwise what we're going to have is the bias continuing, and it's
Mm.
quite complicated to figure out. You know, there are talk of all female accelerators or women accelerators and other things, but it is a challenge, you know. So it's not just about championing and
Mm-hmm.
advocating for it, it's a case of actually making real world differences. And I'm not a fan of segregation at all, but I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes you need to segregate or to be able to integrate, you know, to
Yeah.
build people up.
Yeah. That's one of the things that for me, I be seeing. I worked with women, a lot of women. The CEOs, my company, women. My tech partner there and the company is a woman as well. They are amazing. I work with them. It's I know the benefit they bring to the company and everything. And actually, when I started a company called Hirebrain as well, I did a research as well, and I saw that actually, because I'm Brazilian, right, and I trying to help a lot of Brazilians to get working jobs in Ireland, and most in tech, and we've been very successful doing that. And one of the research that I found was more for the US. I couldn't found this in EU back then. That shows, like, for example, a person that's non-Native American, for example, they were hired to work there in the US. They were enabling more like than 20 jobs for Native Americans. So like because of their hard working and
Yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
But then
That's where the champion succession
yeah,
things
exactly.
comes
But there
from.
is
Yeah.
there is some things that for me it's like I've been seeing that very interesting when I talk to both women and men in tech. That maybe this could be some research you guys could do. Like for example, when I talk to the guys, like most men that work in tech, they're always looking for getting another job and getting higher paid jobs. Like they change position, they change the job in the same position, but they continue growing their salary. So they
Yeah.
continue striving to do that. They're always looking for the other window and see there is an opportunity right there to get more of a salary. And I wonder because this is an empiric. That's not. I didn't do any research. It's just a suggestion to see like
Sure.
how is it on the other side as well. How is it with the other genders? Because what I've seen most is like there is a
Yeah.
lot of women that got in tech, they got a good salary, but they stay in that same position for like 5, 6 years. And
I have written on my notes. I was thinking of things to talk about. One of them is
yeah,
help in salary negotiations.
exactly. And
So
you have
yeah,
to start a
absolutely.
negotiation and actually try to actually see like well, I'm a high tech engineer. I can get more out of it, And after
Yeah.
and then for me it's like when you if you're satisfied in the company, it's fine. You just do your job there. You wanted to stay at that company, that's fine. For example, I was talking to a friend of mine from one of these big tech companies. He's been there for 4 years and he's looking for move because uh, you don't get much of a raise staying in the same
Right.
position, same
Right.
company,
Right. Right.
and your job in the salary actually start to decrease through because of the inflation. So you wanted to keep yourself ahead of inflation. So you wanted to move it to another position because of that. So I wonder,
Of
like,
course.
and this come for the questions like for you and for like this because you doing this thing this work with women about salary negotiation and everything. Like, what do you see is the main challenge for women nowadays in tech and working with AI and all this stuff?
So I'm working on a couple of nonprofits.
All right.
One of which is a group called All Tech is Human, and
Okay.
so they've started a mentoring program. So at the moment, I'm mentoring 4 students globally,
Mm-hmm.
but within my time zone, and this is replicated globally. So it's happening all over the place, and we're mentoring masters and PhD students, not in our own universities, and not for salary, but just for the point of view of can we help connect them and can
Mm.
we give them ideas having got to a
Mm-hmm.
position ourselves that we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to. And I'm finding that incredibly useful. It's a small group, just 4 of me, and we meet once a month for 6 months. And I say to them, what do you want? Where do you want to go? And then it's my job to connect them. I actually had 2 of them into class this morning
Oh,
to give them some
nice.
experience. And so it's just a way of them talking about their research, but then me saying, okay, listen, how do we make this saleable for you? Have you thought about research? Have you thought about consultancy? While you're still training and get your edge, what does your LinkedIn page look like?
Yeah.
Do you know how that works?
Mm-hmm.
All
Mm-hmm.
this sort of stuff. So start small, really practical, but we call it a pod and it's kind of nice. And we all look forward to talking to each other. And I've given myself the role of self-ascribed to champion each of them, in as many ways as I can within the 6 months. So I'll be talking about their research. I'll be posting on LinkedIn about it. I'm getting them to develop course material out of their work. So it's that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, it's going to need to be bigger than 4 people.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes, yeah.
but in terms of scaling it. But it's about, I don't like this idea of mentors. I like the idea of champion, and there's a lovely saying, which is, when you get to a position that you can take your foot off the accelerator for a
Mm.
moment and go, do you know what? The bills are paid. I've done a good decade's work here. I'm good. I can relax a little bit and you can take a breath and exhale. Then it's your chance or your turn, if you're so inclined, and I do believe we all should be, out of just the kindness of the way that life may have been good to us,
Mm-hmm.
that we need to pass that forward, and so that becomes the act of service. And so this lovely phrase is, be a ladder, a light, or a lifeboat, and it's like, are you helping someone get up? And you're doing the same with the Brazilian community now, with your work. Are you shining a light on their work? Or are you a lifeboat? Are you giving them a dig out? Are you
Mm.
bringing them into wherever you are to say, do you know what? Try this and see if that works.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we all adopted that mentality, we'd find it an awful lot better. The difficulty is there's a lot of snake oil salespeople out there who go, "Oh, I'll be your life coach consultant." I'm not saying
That's
life
true.
coaches are wrong or anything, but just they're not actually able to tangibly help. Maybe that's more on the therapy side, and that's out of
Mm.
my remit, But
Yeah.
there isn't a lack of confidence, and the word imposter syndrome or the phrase gets bandied around all the time. And I'm like, imposter syndrome's a good thing. in
Mm.
my mind, because it's a motivating factor to make you lean into the fact and also acknowledge the fact that every single person feels fear and feels they don't deserve to be there or heard or anything. Everybody, even the biggest public speakers I've ever
Sure.
come across. It's just a case of going, what's the worst that could happen? So what? And engendering that. You need to connect to people that have walked the walk. It's the most important thing, and they go, well, how did you do it? And I'm like, God, my career's all over the place, like a big squiggle. There's no linear path here. And to share that. And so part of what I do for my students in UCD is we do these fireside chats, and I get people, again, stalking people on LinkedIn. I get people to come in to class and talk about their journey. We don't video it. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just the class and them. And they talk about the reality of being an entrepreneur or being in tech or, their journey. And then other people go, oh, do you know what? Yeah, that sounds like me, or that's resonating with me. And, and then they feel a little bit more comfortable to move on. So I think the more, I know we started by talking about AI, but the more we connect, humanly and in that sense of vulnerability, the
Mhm.
better.
Yeah, because then, when we make AI move a lot of tedious things out of the way, we can connect ourselves as a human way better,
I think that's what it's going to give us time for. It's going to give us
Exactly.
time for the stuff that we were evolved to be here for, which is socialization and purpose.
It's true. It's true. That's
I
that's
told
for
you I was an
me.
optimist.
That's great. Yeah. So what kind of support system today you do, like for women in tech, or like to help people to grow in the tech sector?
Yeah, so I do a fair bit of public speaking, some paid, some not. I go to the opening of an envelope these days. I say yes to everything, which I just think you never. And the reason is you just never know who you might meet or where
Mm-hmm.
that might go. I don't mean professionally for me. I mean
Mm-hmm.
in terms of if you're stuck behind a desk or behind a computer screen, who are you really meeting, and what
Mm.
are you doing? So especially now post COVID, I kind of made a promise to myself I'd get out and about as much as possible. I go to a lot of the accelerators, things like Dog Patch
Mm.
and the NDRC. I just sit and watch, and then I make sure I engage with 2, 3, 4 people that are there and just say anything I can do for you in any way. I remember going to one of the last ones. And there was a young woman there, and she was being circled like a shark tank by VCs, and like
That's
she was
nice.
like, whoa. And on one hand, really excited. I mean, she has an amazing company, but an idea that's really, she's going to do very well out of it. It's very unique, but and very well researched. But I could sort of see, it's all male VCs, and everyone's like, hey, can I have a word? Can I have a word? Can I have a word? And I just pulled her apart for a second. I was like, hi, this is who I am, and this is what I do. Are you okay? And she was like, do you know anything about VC funding? And I'm like, okay, don't be talking to them yet then. Like, come over here and have a chat. And I said, the biggest mistake you might make right now, because
Yeah.
you're vulnerable, is to potentially say yes to the first thing that comes along without getting the right advice. And I said,
True.
there are other people that can give you advice. And so it's little things. I don't mean I'm sweeping in and saving people, but it's little things like that. When you see somebody else coming up and you can say, hey, listen, in some ways I call them the champagne problems. There's a whole load of amazing things ahead of you, and
Yeah.
you're not going to know how to negotiate them. Seek out people that have done it before, but be cautious, obviously, also who you talk to and what advice you take. So
Yeah.
I think it's that. I think it's connecting. I also think it's visibility. We have we really should share our stories more about the crazy stuff, the bad stuff, the failures, the fuck ups, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And we're not very good at that. We're getting a little bit better at it. There was actually a really interesting series that came through the States, which was called, I think it was called the Fuck Up Night or something. And it was like once a month you'd meet and you'd all talk about everything that went wrong. And it was
All right.
brilliant. And I think that sort of level of visibility and vulnerability is very refreshing.
Mm.
And the more we can do that, the better. But also to be really aware of the shiny new generative AI stuff that's coming out that everyone's going, ooh, this is going to be amazing. And then educate yourself so you don't feel left behind. So I guess if I had to sum all that up, what I'm trying to say is, you've got to be in it to win it. You've got to be leaning into this stuff to be part of it. And we have a very small but fairly friendly ecosystem in Ireland. And I'm working in a couple of groups like Tech Founder, like I told you, to really help support in the
Mm,
best way possible, not for equity, not for shares, not for any payout, just for the sheer will of the more diverse we are, the better,
it's true.
for the feel good factor.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's really interesting. And that is any how can I say that? There is any stereotypes that you can identify nowadays that is like that used to have before about like women in entrepreneurship and women in tech that it still exists today, or do you feel like most of the stereotypes are
I
already
I
over?
do I do think that stereotype still persists, and I
Mm-hmm.
think we have big issues around women of childbearing age. It's no longer
Okay.
legal to ask, are you intending to have children? But
All
I
right.
think a pervasive fear.
Yeah.
If a woman is coming in, stepping into a role, potentially she's 34, 35, like kind of there may be some worries there, I suppose, in terms of that. But my answer is we'll pay her enough so that she can afford childcare and she'll be an amazing worker. So
Mm.
I think there are some pervasive fears around that. I also think sometimes it goes back to this sort of idea of the boys club in tech, and it's not the only, we see this in finance as well, and many other areas, where it's like, oh, might be disruptive to bring a woman in, like kind of like, but I
Mm.
think that says more about old attitudes than modern understandings of what it is. The research is very clear. You don't just need diversity in terms of gender; you need it right across the board. And
Mm-hmm.
this intersectionality, man, woman, this polarization, is not helping us anymore at all. It's can they do the task? Can they bring something new to the task, added value? And that's it. And so whatever package that comes in, that's the right package for your job.
Yeah, that's interesting because that is a with my conversation with uncles before the previous episode of the podcast that we talked about. We discussed about this thing about on HR, like there is a lot of bias code on HR, and Amazon screw
Sure.
up made a little screw up back then, and
Yeah.
it's amazing to me that companies when they come to hiring, because it's where we're gonna bring diversity to the company, bring disruption, it's where you hiring people,
Yeah.
and companies still look at name, gender, and photos. I think that
Right.
should be anything that a company should look, because it doesn't matter how the person
No.
looks to you, it
I mean,
matters what they
and
bring to you. The individual
absolutely.
the individual it will come and do the job if you feel like they prepare for the job, if you have the right skills for it, and not the way the
Yeah.
person look, the person names, and the person's gender. You know what I mean?
I mean, where do you draw the line? This person's
Yeah,
got a tattoo, they can't do this job. Like, like
yeah,
those days hopefully are gone. Like, kind of,
yeah.
and so, I mean, yes, there's sociological research that shows us very clearly the same job application, change the name to male to female, and it's a very different, acceptance rate.
Hmm.
At its most basic level, of course, that bias exists. But I think the bias is also in terms of generation. It's in terms of culture,
Hmm.
change your name to, the but one guy, and he was Chinese, and I said to him, what's your name? I met him at a sort of I think it was a Chamber of Commerce mixer, and he said Albert, and I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, no, it's not my real name, but I was told by my boss to have a more European name. I was like, and you
Ah.
picked Albert. So, but again, this idea of sort of homogenization that we should all be this one type of person
Mhm.
is ridiculous,
It
because it
is,
goes
yeah.
against everything that we're trying to do here. I think AI, the recruitment process is very biased. And so we're often going against ourselves here, right? This is a sort of a self-sabotage in the bigger picture,
Mhm.
and we might not realize it. You've got people on the neurodivergent spectrum who are incredible at hyper focus,
Okay.
joining the dots that are somewhat unrelated. Actually, probably around 80% of all
Mhm.
successful entrepreneurs would have ADHD, for example. You've got a very high percentage of people on the neurodivergent spectrum in tech, of course, as well. And so what we're seeing there is is, but because of a lack of people feeling they can't disclose, they can't get accommodations because the disclosure is a stigma.
Mm.
On top of that, so you've got that to start with, your learning and your working styles and the way that your brain works. That could be incredibly advantageous if people were just thought differently about the recruitment process. Because if somebody is autistic, they're going to find eye contact very difficult. They're going to find the interview very difficult. We've got to redesign these systems, right? So the
Yeah.
other thing also is their age. They're against ageism. So my students would be coming into the Innovation Academy when we whip them around for 3 to 6 months, get them really primed and ready for the new market, and we send them out there and they can't get past the algorithm,
Oh.
because they're 45 or they're
Mm.
50 or even older, and so, or they have a gap in their CV because they were carers or raising children or whatever, so, but industry has two major problems right now: talent acquisition and talent retention.
Yeah.
Those people are perfect for that job because they're not going to jump around as much as Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming.
Sure.
So it's we're crazy. We're not looking at what we've got right underneath our nose, and because our systems that we've designed are
Mhm.
wrong. And I do feel that AI, once we understand, we work on the coded bias and everything else, I do feel that AI is potentially an answer to that, to get us through that, where we need to start thinking about the task instead of the person that fits in my mind with the bias of what I'm
Mhm.
imagining.
Mhm.
Whatever package that person comes in will be completely different.
Mhm.
But if they can do the task,
Yeah.
that's what we're looking for. And I think we've lost sight of that. I think HR needs a massive overhaul, and I know that it also thinks this because I was at the convention center at their last conference, and this
Mhm.
is all they were talking about.
Yeah.
So about the panic.
Oh yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I've worked like for nearly 4 years now in algorithms to actually try to help
Yeah,
to hire like actually expats into European countries. And one of the main challenge I believe it is the bias is not produced by the algorithm itself. The algorithm doesn't produce
right.
bias. The
It's the
bias
code. It's the biased information in the first
is
place.
is the data. The problem
Yeah,
is the data
exactly.
that
Yeah,
comes from. And more like so is the who's treating the data. So like because there is a human input there to treat the data to
absolutely.
understand if the data is biased or not, and then the algorithm is going to do they're just going to use that data to actually spew out something for you. So that's what the
Yeah,
algorithm does. So
yeah.
then we I think on the HR there should be actually the requirement should be like to hire actually experts on cleaning data and then do unbiased data to actually help
I'm
to
right there with you.
yeah, so right, just to help, like trying to help people to understand that we should exclude some, because sometimes a lot of data means there's a lot of noise. A lot of noise
Yeah,
means you're gonna have unfortunate bias in the algorithm, and removing some elements. So, for example, gender, name,
yeah,
age,
yeah,
photo. This all of things
yeah.
they should remove that from the data,
Absolutely.
and then you
Actually,
focus on
photos
the
kind of
job.
gone now, which is good.
Yeah, focus.
Photos gone.
Exactly. Focus on the job, focus on what you need.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
the for me, I'm baffled sometimes that like companies still looking at that where the company acts needs to be profitable. It needs to actually to be high productive and brings profit to the table. What
yeah.
a person
Yeah.
gender would do that to you? It wouldn't change it. It wouldn't improve your company's
I
behavior.
completely agree. There's so much talk about bias, and I'm
Yeah.
like, humans are biased.
Yeah,
Humans.
humans are biased.
It's us.
Yeah, we are
We're not
screwing
talking
up.
about
We're screwing up the
fixing our
algorithm.
own biases here. We're talking about
Yeah,
large language models bias. What about us? What about stop being racist and sexist for a starter, or
yeah,
ageist, ableist?
it's
Like,
true.
yeah. No, it's absolutely true.
Because when you have a good data, they're gonna show you something that you never thought before, and you're gonna be amazed by that.
Yeah,
And a
yeah,
lot of things I was amazed when I was working with this algorithm that was developing, to see like for example the Pakistanis, they are actually one of the nationalities in Europe that being hired most of the like the top position high skill jobs in tech and engineering. And I
yeah.
didn't know that. I thought it was like maybe maybe Indians, maybe other nationality, but not Pakistanis. So it's
Yeah.
amazing when you have an unbiased data and you can see actually what's going on.
Well, and this begs the question of how we go back to
Yeah.
education, right? So,
Hmm.
like, how do we teach people to
Exactly.
be ready? What kind of courses can we develop, and how do we teach people to be ready for this cleaned up, more unbiased world? Let's say that in an optimistic way,
Hmm.
And for me, I'd be interested in hearing your opinion on this. For me, I feel that the biggest skill is curiosity, and then after that comes critical thinking, problem solving, and grit, resilience, the
Hmm.
idea to bounce back after things. What in your mind are the biggest skill set of the future?
Yeah, I think the skill set of the future is gonna have a lot of logical thought, I believe, and a lot of like problem solving and a lot of
Yeah.
work around specific themes rather than being an overall. So, for example,
Yeah.
at school we learn history, we learn geography, we learn all these things all together in one year. But I don't think there would be a requirement for the future that you need to learn all of these to actually discover later what you wanted to do. I think the reverse approach should be best. So like
Yeah.
see what the kids are more comfortable of and focus on that for them. So like, oh, they're good at problem solving.
Yeah.
Let's do this, and the other things they're gonna be we bring up as a sub requirement, like they can learn, but don't focus on that. Focus on what really matters for their kids. So because we're talking about like more an engineering perspective, on a logical perspective,
Sure.
but there is a lot of people they have more artistic perspective. They like music, they like arts, and why not focus on that for them? Why we don't do that?
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
and I
I
feel that should
completely
be the
agree.
they study.
And in my model, instead of going from, so if I was to redesign the world, right?
Yeah,
Because that's what I think about.
sure.
Would be, instead of doing education, work, retirement. Because we
Hmm.
see from the stats that when most people retire, they die quickly because they don't
Mm,
have a purpose, right? So,
yeah,
and they don't, have enough exercise in their life and all of the other things, which we need to flourish. So if we have that, so we have a small amount of basic education, and then we have a little bit of, a little bit of work holiday education all the
yeah,
way through, sometimes in bigger chunks than in others. Um, and we're supported in whatever way financially, however we're going to work that out, in order to make that happen. So you're not making the bulk of your money in the middle, and
hmm.
then you just sit with it, at the
Sure.
end. I think this idea of dipping in and out of subjects, I see this. The mature students, if I'm teaching undergrads, right? So I've got so I'm in UCD, maybe I've got 300 undergrads. There may be 20 mature students, if they're
Hmm.
coming in at a BA honors level, for example. Say it's a BA honors in, I don't know, sort of engineering or something, and they're coming in. The mature students are at the front. They're engaged. They're writing everything down. They're listening. They're so switched on. They're always asking questions. Everyone else is on TikTok or Snapchat. Like kind of go, oh, look at the slides later, whatever. I mean, I'm joking. Not everybody, but some. But the mature students, because they get this opportunity to learn later in life, are 100% engaged. And that's why I think, in a little bit like Oscar Wilde said, youth is wasted on the young. I think sometimes education is wasted on the young.
Mm,
Why are we making decisions when we're 18 about a subject for the rest of our life, when most of us won't be in that subject?
mm. Yeah,
If
it's
you
true. It's true.
look at PhD level, right, you've got about 10% from academic societies. PhD level, 10% go into academic jobs.
All right.
High levels of unemployment for PhD students, and it's not really addressed right. If you're a postdoctoral researcher past a PhD, it's about 20% of you will get an academic job.
All
So
right.
what about the other 80%? Where are they going? And they've spent years in university. I know, because I did it myself. I didn't finish college until I was in my 40s. So as a consequence, like, what is that world going to look like for them? So I think dip in and out of education all throughout your life. I think
Mm,
that's got to be the key. I really do. Well, that's it. We've
yeah.
sorted the world out now.
Yeah, it's true. And then it's as well, like, for example, I was into computer since I was 12. So and I started programming when I was 14. So for me, it's something like I really got what I wanted since the beginning. But of course, I have this thing as well, like, because I come from Brazil and the work environment in Brazil is so different from Ireland. And I got a little bit like down along the way, and I was trying other things. So like it always
Tough, yeah.
happens, like that you're gonna be like, I wanted to do this, but there is some moments in life gonna show up to you, and you're gonna be like, oh, maybe I should do something else, and you go do something else, and then you come
And you
back.
should be able to have that freedom, because that will either
Yeah,
take you down a path you'll continue on, or you'll
exactly.
experiment, or you'll go, I hate it.
It's true. It's
Like,
true. Yeah.
or you meet somebody else that takes you off into a new direction. In our terms, we call it the squiggle career. In a corporate sense, it's called a portfolio career,
All
which
right.
sounds very popular, but it's the idea of dipping in and out of loads of different things. And I
Mm,
think that's what the school system should be about. Trying to have a linear career where you decide at age 13 or 14, I'm going to be a dot dot dot
mm.
lawyer, doctor, engineer, you know coffee shop worker, whatever it is you're going to be doing. How could you possibly know you're a
No.
child?
Yeah. No, you can't.
That's you'll develop it. But yeah, I think the education of the future, or now, where it's going right now, is personalization, AI assisted. And I
Mm,
think it's to do with these, what they call transversal skills:
I see.
problem solving and critical thinking. 100%.
Yeah, there will be a lot of like how can I say, yeah, prompt engineer. They're gonna write prompts on
That's going to
ChatGPT.
be a flash in the pan. In fact, I don't know. I do know the one job that I was laughing about the other day, that Chat GPT have a kill switch engineer.
A kill switch engineer.
Just one person, like on a motorbike, like kind of with wild hair, and like
Yeah.
comes in at the last minute, and like turns it all
With
off.
a trigger.
There's only going to be one of those jobs.
All right. All right, Lollie, I think that we approaching like at the end, because like
Yeah,
I promise you, it'll be no more than
there's
one
no more to
hour.
say after that.
Yeah, it's true. But the one thing that I talk about, like at the beginning, we were talking about, we start talking about work and everything. But then I was thinking, like for you, what is the what would be the intrinsic values, for you that makes your work be something more than money, like what is the this
Mm.
intrinsic values for you, and like how this intrinsic values for you makes you like a sense of purpose, like brings you the sense of purpose.
Yeah, that's easy to answer. Affecting change. Like, so, in basic terms, it seems to be that a common theme has emerged, from my skill set to where my students are, and I'm incredibly fortunate to have found it. Because a lot of people hate what they do, and I'm not in that situation. I'm very privileged. I don't, and I never underestimate, how lucky I am. And that is that I help people who are stuck get unstuck. That seems to be what I do. And that's, I can only see that now, really, like after years and years, where like people will be a bit stuck for whatever reason, and I've been stuck. I know how it works. um and I will help them get unstuck through a variety of different things. Sometimes that's education, sometimes it's championing, sometimes it's just introducing them to somebody else, and sometimes it's just being open and vulnerable, so that they can feel that they can be that too. So I feel like I'm the unsticker.
That's amazing.
And I see people change because of that, because they want to. They wouldn't, my path and their path wouldn't cross if they
Hmm.
didn't want some kind of change.
Yeah.
And so when they come, we come in across each other through whatever mechanism it is, a nonprofit, or UCD, or otherwise, um, I generally can feel them being stuck at a crossroads, not knowing what to do, where to go. And I'm like, okay, well, let's have a look at what you've got and where you want to go. That seems to be quite easy for me over years, to be able to sort of help them just take that next step, or that next few steps, and map that out. So that's what I do.
That's amazing. That's good. That's great. Yeah. So, do you have any question for me? You can fire up any question as well if you want.
Yeah, if you could do it all again,
Oh, again. Oh, we can do it.
what one thing would you do differently?
Uh, everything. I feel like I would come to Ireland earlier, because
Good answer. Yeah.
I feel like,
Why?
because I found my sense of purpose here, and
Mm,
one of the things that I was lost when I left Brazil, because I didn't know if I wanted to actually continue working tech, because
right.
it's such a different environment, such a different way that the relation of work it happens in Brazil back in 2014. And when I came to Ireland, I didn't came here to find a job here. I came here to learn English and see what happens. And then later I discovered I could get a job here. And then I went through the path to getting a job and everything. And but then between this time that I didn't work in tech, and I work with a lot of different things and then come back to work in tech, I rediscovered that actually that was my passion since the beginning, since I was
Yeah.
12 years old. And then this gave me purpose, and then that's make me wake up 5 a.m. every day to work.
Well, you must love it and you feel you're adding value. And aren't we lucky to be part of that cohort that enjoy what they do?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
All right, Lolly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was perfect. I think that